I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. It is the week of April the 1st. This is Marked by Grace, and this week I am answering a question from you, and it is, how should Christians think about the Alabama Supreme Court ruling? I love answering your questions. That's the point of the podcast. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, you can send it in to markedbygrace at fbcjax.com. That's FBCJax with an X, and I would love to answer as many of them as I can get to. This question about how to think about the Alabama Supreme Court ruling is a really, really timely one. It's a very, very important question. And as I answer how Christians should think about that, I don't want to assume that everybody listening to the podcast knows exactly what I'm talking about. So let me give a little bit of background about what is going on with the question, how should we think about the Alabama Supreme Court ruling? And then once I give that background, then explain several ways that I think Christians need to think about it. So in order to understand what's going on with this Alabama Supreme Court ruling, you first of all need to know what in vitro fertilization is. So in vitro fertilization is what's known as an artificial reproductive technology. It's a technology that's intended to help couples who are having trouble having a baby in the natural way. It's intended to help them have a child. And what they do is they fertilize the egg, which that fertilization normally happens inside the woman's body. They fertilize the egg in glass. That's what in vitro means. In vitro means in glass. So it's fertilization in glass. The fertilization of the egg happens in a lab, and then those fertilized eggs are transferred into the woman's body for development and, God willing, ultimately birth. But the point is the technological novelty is that the conception of the child happens outside the human body, which was impossible at any point in human history until the modern age. The issue that comes up with in vitro fertilization is because the work of conception happening outside the body is so expensive, the harvesting of the eggs and all the rest is so expensive and takes such work, that the idea is to fertilize far more eggs than would ever be safe for a woman to carry in her uterus. And so what do you do with the excess of fertilized eggs? What do you do with the excess embryos? What do you do with the excess human beings? Well, many times those excess humans are stored in freezing containers for hopeful further use. That's where the Center for Reproductive Medicine in Mobile, Alabama comes in. This is a firm that does in vitro fertilization to try to seek to help couples have babies. And in the case of the Alabama Supreme Court that we're talking about, 3 couples had embryos stored at the Center for Reproductive Medicine in Mobile, and some unauthorized person got into the reproductive center and interrupted the storage process and destroyed the embryos. The 3 couples that lost these embryos were very upset at the destruction of what was their children, and they sued for legal relief. And the Alabama Supreme Court ruled 8-1 that children are children, this is a quote, without exception based on developmental stage, physical location, or any other ancillary characteristics. And they even went on to say without any extrauterine exception. So what the Alabama Supreme Court said is when these embryos were destroyed, babies were destroyed, human beings were destroyed, and the Center for Reproductive Medicine in Mobile is liable for the loss of human life. That was the judgment of the Alabama Supreme Court. So that's a little bit of background. There's a lot more information out there that's available. But just as I answer the question, those are kind of the high points that you need to know to understand what's happening here. I think as Christians think about this, there are basically three responses that I think it's crucial for us to have. The first response is that we need to affirm that what the Alabama Supreme Court said was really good. The reality is that Scripture and science both teach that people are people from the point of conception. David will talk about how he was sinful from the time his mother conceived him. That is, he was a person, even a person who had sin in his heart. He was a person from the time of his conception. The Bible teaches that life begins at conception. This is also what science teaches. Science textbooks used to uncontroversially teach that life begins at conception, that when a male sperm enters a female egg, you have a newly created entity that has its own DNA, and it is the very first stage of development of a true and authentic human being. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what science teaches. And so we got to say that the Alabama Supreme Court got it right. They agreed with the truth. They agreed with the truth of science and with the truth of Scripture. And we want to affirm that they got it right. And we want to be really glad about that. That leads to the second response that I think Christians need to have, and that is we need to celebrate this. We should celebrate the decision of the Alabama Supreme Court. This is important to me because we are all living in a world where it seems like a lot's going wrong. We're living life in a time where just about everywhere you look, it seems like things are going the wrong way. Things are not agreeing with God's point of view. But the ruling of the Alabama Supreme Court teaches us that in a fallen world, there are places and there are institutions and there are times when people get things right. And this is one of those times. The Alabama Supreme Court got it right. We are right to agree with that. We're right to be grateful for that. We're right to celebrate that. I think it's good news for Christians to read this judgment and go, thank the Lord. This is a great, great positive development. So how do we think about this? We affirm it. We celebrate it. I said there's three realities that stand out to me. And the third one is I think we need to be careful. That is, I think we need to respond to this with caution. There is a cautionary tale here about in vitro fertilization. I want to be very careful what I'm saying here. Couples who have difficulty getting pregnant and who want the very, very good thing of a precious baby. It's a good thing to want. It's right to want to pursue it. It's right to want to try hard to get it. And when you want that good thing, it's very easy to see the potential blessing of IVF. Oh, we can get a kid where we don't have one right now. This story in this Supreme Court ruling reminds us that there are also risks that come with in vitro fertilization. It relates to what we call in Christian theology and in Christian ethics, the separation of the goods. God makes goods to go together. So think about sex and marriage. That's very relevant to this case. God made marriage good and he made sex good, and those goods go together. And if you separate the goods, you start getting into trouble. We know all about this. If you have sex outside of marriage, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. It's not because sex is bad. It's because the separation of the goods is bad. Well, in the same way, babies go together with sex, which goes together with marriage. And when you start separating those goods, you start to get into risky areas. We have a technical ability to create children without sex and without marriage. We have a technical ability to create children in a lab. I'm not saying that couples shouldn't try to have children. I'm not saying that we shouldn't rejoice when we have the ability to do things we couldn't do without technological advancements. But I'm saying this creates risks. I'm saying it's actually a shocking reality that we have human beings, conceived embryos, conceived babies, embryos, human beings frozen in storage tankers. That creates a risk. It creates moral responsibility. And all I'm saying is that we need to be aware of that. We need to be careful about that. We need to be sure that we, in our pursuit of the blessings of IVF, that we are also aware of the risks. And so the Alabama Supreme Court ruling, very, very important. We need to affirm it. We need to celebrate what they said, and we need to be careful. And I hope that helps you this week.